The phoenix you forgot was you. A journey through Jung's modern man in search of a soul. Hook. The flame you mistook for a disease. There was once a man who walked into a clinic with fire in his chest. He called it anxiety. The doctors called it stress. Machines scanned his heart. Blood was drawn. Results came back clean. "You're fine," they said. "Maybe you're just tired." But he knew. Deep down, he knew. Something was burning. And it wasn't just burnout. It was something ancient, something forgotten, something alive inside him that had no name in modern medicine. Not a diagnosis, a calling. Maybe this sounds familiar. Maybe you're watching this because your days feel numb and your nights feel loud. Maybe you've done everything right, chased success, followed the rules, smiled through the chaos, and still you feel caged. Not trapped by circumstance, but by something worse. The haunting suspicion that you're living a life meant for someone else. That behind your job title, your curated photos, your polite conversations, you're missing. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst, most people only half quote, once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But what if the real absurdity is avoiding it forever? This video is not about fixing you. You're not broken. It's not about motivation, productivity, or 10 tips to be better. It's about remembering. Remembering the part of you that existed before the world taught you who to be. The part of you that dreamed in symbols, that wept without reason, that laughed from the belly. The part that burns in silence, like a phoenix trapped in a cage. The flame is not your enemy, the cage is. Welcome to a journey inspired by Jung's modern man in search of a soul. A journey into your own forgotten fire. We'll follow the trail of burnout, masks, dreams, shadows, and silence. Not to escape, but to return. Because the cage was never locked, and the phoenix was always you. Insight 1. The cage was built before you could speak. Before you had words, you had a song. Not a literal melody, but a rhythm. Raw, instinctual, untamed. You laughed too loud. You cried when others smiled. You stared too long. You asked why when everyone else nodded. And then the world began to build you a cage, one polite correction at a time. Don't say that. Sit still. Be good. Be quiet. By the time you learned to write your name, you had already begun to forget your fire. This is the tragedy no one warns us about. The cage isn't forced on you overnight. It's gifted with love, and it's built by people who mean well. Parents, teachers, even friends. They wrap you in armor not knowing it will one day become your prison. It starts with protecting you from rejection, embarrassment, pain. But slowly, you learn a dangerous lesson. Who you are is not acceptable, only who you pretend to be. Jung saw this again and again in his patients. Not just trauma victims or the mentally ill, but normal people, successful, educated, respected. Yet behind their eyes, he noticed the same flicker. A silent scream trapped in a lifetime of performance. These weren't people who needed pills. They needed permission. Permission to remember. Take Emily, a lawyer Jung never met, but would have understood instantly. On paper, she had everything. Ivy League education, corner office, perfect Instagram. But at night, she'd lie awake with a weight on her chest she couldn't name. She'd think, maybe I'm just tired. But no vacation ever fixed it. Because the problem wasn't exhaustion. It was disconnection. From the girl who used to paint dragons and tell stories to the sky. That girl didn't die. She was caged the moment someone laughed and said, "That's silly. Grow up." So here's the truth that stings. The cage was built before you could speak. And if you're not careful, you'll spend your entire life mistaking its bars for your bones. But what Jung uncovered, and what this journey will reveal, is that the real self isn't fragile. It's just hidden, like a flame behind glass. And the first step isn't to fight the cage. It's to see it, to name it, to trace the moment you traded wonder for approval. Have you ever wondered when exactly you stopped dancing for yourself? When your laughter started needing permission? When your sadness began requiring an excuse? Because once you see the bars, you can question them. And when you question them, they crack. But this is only the first fracture in the cage. The next is far more dangerous because it's not just built around you. It's fused to your face. Insight 2. The mask you mistook for your face. There's a strange moment in every actor's life when the performance becomes second nature. When they no longer play the character, they become it. But what if you've been acting for so long that you forgot it was a role? Jung called it the persona, the social mask we wear to survive the world. It's not evil. It helps us function, fit in, navigate chaos. But over time, the mask fuses with our identity. We no longer say, I'm wearing a mask. We say, this is me, even when it isn't. Imagine a child who's naturally loud and curious, always asking uncomfortable questions. At home, she's shushed. At school, she's labeled disruptive. Over time, she learns to be quiet, agreeable, likable. Eventually, everyone says, she's so easygoing. And she smiles, because that's who she's supposed to be. But inside, there's a storm she doesn't know how to express, a scream she no longer believes she's allowed to release. Jung worked with countless patients like this. People whose breakdowns weren't signs of weakness, but signs of self-rebellion. The mask was cracking, and what emerged wasn't madness, it was truth. You see, the ego, the mask, loves order, logic, predictability. It's built to protect you, but in doing so, it also silences the parts of you that are wild, irrational, emotional, human. The result? A life that looks perfect on the outside, but feels hollow within. You laugh at the right jokes, succeed in the right careers, say all the right things. And yet, a small voice inside whispers, this isn't it. And you whisper back, but it's too late to change. But what if that whisper is the real you? Have you ever caught yourself pretending to enjoy something just because everyone else did? Have you ever said, I'm fine, while your chest tightened like a fist? Have you ever smiled so much it hurt, but couldn't stop? Because people needed you to be okay? That's not you failing. That's your soul resisting extinction. The truth is, the mask will always slip. Maybe in moments of rage, maybe in art, maybe in heartbreak, or maybe at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering why you feel like a stranger in your own life. And when it slips, you'll face a choice. Glue it back on and keep performing. Or start peeling it away. But be warned, once you do, something terrifying happens. You begin to feel everything again. Not just pain, but joy. Not just fear, but freedom. And that's when you realize the mask never protected you. It imprisoned you. And once the mask falls, you don't find emptiness. You find fire. You find the first flicker of a truth that's been burning beneath the surface all along. But that flicker, it's only the beginning. Because what happens next is the ignition. Insight. 3. The flame beneath the exhaustion. You thought you were just tired. Everyone around you said so. Take a break. Get more sleep. Maybe try yoga. But deep down, you knew this wasn't that kind of tired. This wasn't the exhaustion that a weekend off or a vacation could fix. This was a tired that came from pretending to be someone you're not. A fatigue not of the body, but of the soul. Carl Jung encountered this phenomenon long before we had a word for it. Today we call it burnout. But what Jung saw was far more dangerous. He saw people who had become estranged from themselves, who had lived so long as their masks that their inner fire had no room to breathe. And like any fire without oxygen, it began to smolder, not extinguish, but build pressure. Imagine a sealed furnace. Day by day, you feed it with compromises, small betrayals, silences swallowed, feelings denied. On the outside, you function, you show up, you perform. But inside, heat rises. Eventually, the seal can't hold. It starts with small leaks, irritation, fatigue, anxiety. Then it escalates, panic attacks, emotional collapse, identity crisis. And finally, the breakdown everyone mislabels as failure is actually a signal that the flame wants to rise again. Let me tell you about Daniel, 38, partner at a top consulting firm, smart, successful, respected. But one day, in the middle of a client meeting, he froze, couldn't speak, couldn't move. He said later, "It felt like something inside me just snapped." He took a leave of absence, went to therapy. Everyone assumed it was stress. But as the sessions unfolded, something deeper emerged. Daniel had spent his entire adult life chasing external worth, titles, status, applause, because as a child, he was only noticed when he achieved. And so, he learned to perform, to please, to succeed, but never to feel. His breakdown wasn't a malfunction. It was an eruption. The flame doesn't die, it waits. And when you ignore it long enough, it demands your attention, not with gentle whispers, but with fire. Have you ever had a moment where your body gave up before your mind did? where you woke up and couldn't move, not from illness, but from emotional paralysis? Have you ever wept without knowing why, or felt a dread so heavy it made the air thick? What if that wasn't weakness? What if that was your soul demanding release? The world will tell you to push through, to numb out, to medicate the flame, but Jung would urge you to listen, to see burnout not as the end, but as the beginning of your return. Because beneath that exhaustion is ignition. Beneath the ashes is fire. And that fire, it doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to make you whole. But before it can rise, it needs space to breathe. And that space begins in the place most of us never dare to look, our dreams. Insight 4. The dreams that dared to speak. Every night, your conscious mind drifts to sleep, and something strange begins to stir. Images flash, symbols appear, people from your past, shadows that don't belong, a staircase that leads nowhere, a flame that won't go out. And then you wake, heart racing, sweat on your brow, and before you can capture the meaning, it vanishes. We've been taught to dismiss dreams, to treat them as mental junk, random firings of a resting brain. But Carl Jung didn't see dreams as noise. He saw them as messages. Not from some mystical force, but from you, the real you, the self you locked away to survive in the daylight. And dreams, they're the voice of that self, shouting through symbols because it knows you won't listen to words. Imagine your unconscious as a wild forest, ancient and alive. Dreams are the animals that slip between trees, trying to guide you deeper. They don't speak English or Vietnamese. They speak myth. They speak image. A burning house might mean your identity is crumbling. A lost child might be your forgotten creativity. A snake might not be danger. It might be healing, transformation, rebirth. One of Jung's patients dreamed of a golden bird locked in a cage. It sang every night, but no one ever heard. She came to therapy complaining of numbness, of going through life like a machine. Jung didn't offer medication. He asked about the bird, and slowly through exploration she realized the bird was her joy, her instinct, her untamed voice. And the cage, it was everything she did to be nice, professional, agreeable. Have you had recurring dreams? The ones that haunt, repeat, beg to be understood? That's not coincidence. That's your phoenix trying to speak through the bars. But here's the problem. When we ignore the language of dreams, we silence our deepest truth. And in that silence, the unconscious grows louder, more disruptive. It leaks through mood swings, irrational fears, unexplained longings. What we repress always returns. Think about it. When's the last time you honored a dream? Not with analysis, but with curiosity. When's the last time you said, "What part of me is trying to get my attention?" You don't need a PhD to understand your dreams. You just need to believe they're worth understanding. Because the unconscious isn't trying to confuse you. It's trying to rescue you, to bring you home, to remind you that the fire you've buried beneath logic, routine, and performance is still alive. And once you begin to listen to those messages, you'll realize they've been leading you somewhere all along, into the shadows, into the dark places you were told to avoid. But in Jung's map of the soul, those shadows, they don't hide monsters. They hide your wings. Insight. A5. The shadow is your other wing. There's a part of you that you've disowned. Maybe it's your anger. Maybe it's your jealousy. Maybe it's the ambition you were told was too much, or the softness someone mocked as weakness. You shoved it down, hid it beneath smiles and silence, and you thought, good, that's dealt with. But you were wrong. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of the psyche that holds everything we reject in order to be accepted. Not just evil or darkness, but also brilliance we're too afraid to claim. And the shadow doesn't disappear because you ignore it. It waits, it festers, it slips out sideways through sarcasm, rage, panic, self-sabotage. It lives in the bitter things you say when you're tired, the dreams you dismiss as childish, the shame that flares up when someone gets too close to who you really are. The tragedy isn't that we have a shadow. The tragedy is that we fear it. Take Olivia, a high school counselor who always put others first, kind, composed, admired. But one day, after months of suppressing her own needs, she snapped, yelled at a student, stormed out, sobbed for hours. "I don't know who I am anymore," she told her therapist. But the truth, that outburst wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. It was the part of her that had been locked away, her truth, her limits, her wildness, finally breaking through the cracks in her controlled persona. The shadow isn't your enemy, it's your other wing. You cannot fly, cannot fully become yourself without integrating it. But that integration demands courage, because it means owning the parts you were taught to hide, the messy parts, the loud parts, the deeply human parts. Have you ever found yourself judging someone only to realize they're expressing a trait you've buried in yourself? Have you hated someone's boldness because you fear your own? Have you mocked someone's vulnerability because it mirrors a softness you're ashamed of? That's not coincidence. That's projection. The unconscious always tries to return what you disown. But here's the twist. When you turn toward your shadow instead of away, something miraculous happens. The parts you feared begin to empower you. Your anger becomes clarity. Your fear becomes intuition. Your envy becomes direction. The cage weakens, the flame rises. Because the shadow isn't darkness, it's potential. It's power denied. Jung didn't say, eliminate your shadow. He said, integrate it. Make it conscious. Make it yours. And once you do, you stop being torn in half. You stop playing tug-of-war between who you are and who you pretend to be. You become whole. But wholeness is just the foundation. To truly rise, you need someone who sees past your fragments, someone who doesn't hand you a roadmap, but a mirror. Insight 6. The therapist who held a mirror, not a map. When you're lost, the first instinct is to look for a map, some external guide with clear instructions. Go here, avoid this, turn there. But when the thing you've lost is yourself, there is no map, only mirrors. And if you're lucky, someone who dares to hold one up when you least expect it. Carl Jung never claimed to fix people. In fact, he warned against therapists who act like mechanics, diagnosing symptoms and offering quick repairs. To Jung, therapy wasn't about correction. It was about reflection. The therapist wasn't a GPS. They were a mirror, gently angled so that you could finally see the parts of you you'd ignored, forgotten, or buried. Because the truth is, no one can tell you who you are. They can only ask the right questions, questions that hurt, questions that heal. Jung's patients didn't come to him for advice. They came because they were unraveling, and he understood that unraveling isn't failure, it's invitation. An invitation to sit with the fire, not run from it, to listen to the dreams, not dismiss them, to meet the shadow, not hide from it. Think of Miguel, a successful entrepreneur who always had it together. But inside, he was quietly imploding. He saw 3 therapists before he met someone who changed everything. Not with advice, but with a single question. Whose life are you living? Miguel paused. Mine, he lied. The therapist didn't correct him. She just looked, waited, let the silence burn. And in that space, Miguel saw himself. Not the CEO, not the husband, not the son, but the boy who once wrote poems, who once dreamed of healing others, who traded art for money and truth for applause. That moment wasn't therapy. It was revelation. The mirror had been held still long enough for the phoenix inside him to flicker. Have you ever wished someone would just tell you what to do with your life? Have you ever begged the universe for signs, only to be met with silence? Maybe the silence is the sign. Maybe what you need is not another answer, but a better question. Because the path forward isn't on a billboard. It's etched in your story, in your contradictions, in your chaos. And it takes a different kind of courage to sit with someone who doesn't promise direction, but promises to witness you as you are. Jung believed that healing happens not when we're taught, but when we're seen. And when you've been truly seen, mask off, shadow exposed, flame flickering, you begin to trust yourself again. You begin to remember that the voice inside you isn't dangerous. It's sacred. But that voice, it has one more secret to tell. One final alarm bell that doesn't mean breakdown. It means birth. Insight 7. The breakdown is a birth. They call it falling apart. Nervous breakdown, midlife crisis, anxiety disorder, identity collapse. Words soaked in fear, shame, and silence. But Jung saw these breakdowns not as failures of the mind, but as the soul's final attempt to be heard. You don't break because you're weak. You break because something inside you refuses to keep living a lie. Think of it this way. A snake does not shed its skin gently. A butterfly does not emerge from the cocoon without struggle. And the phoenix burns, completely. Only then does it rise. Modern life has trained us to avoid pain at all costs, to medicate, distract, scroll, hustle, anything but sit still. anything but listen. But what if the breakdown isn't the problem? What if it's the beginning? Take Raj, 44, 2 kids, a stable job, a safe house. One morning, he couldn't get out of bed. Not for lack of energy, but because something in him knew if he moved, he'd break the illusion forever. After weeks of forcing himself to power through, he finally collapsed in his garage, sobbing into the steering wheel. His family panicked. Doctors prescribed sedatives. But the therapist he eventually saw simply said, "What if this is your soul asking you to come home?" Raj didn't need fixing. He needed truth. He needed to die, not physically, but symbolically, to let the outdated identity, the people pleaser, the quiet achiever burn away. Only then could he begin again. Jung called this process individuation, the painful sacred task of becoming who you truly are, not who the world trained you to be. And like all births, it's messy, it's loud, it hurts, but it's also holy. Have you ever felt like you were coming undone? Not just sad, but disassembled? Like the story of you was unraveling, and you couldn't stop it? That unraveling is not destruction, it's preparation. The fire isn't there to punish. It's there to clear space for something older than your name, truer than your resume, deeper than your roles. The thing no one tells you is that healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like losing everything, but what you're really losing is everything that was never you. And what you gain? A clarity that can't be taught, a voice that can't be silenced, a freedom that no title or paycheck could ever match. You won't return from the fire the same, but you were never meant to. Because to rise as the phoenix, you must let the old self burn. But what rises next isn't just ashes turned to wings. It's the story you were born to tell. The myth you forgot was yours all along. Insight 8. The myth you never claimed. Every culture has its legends. Heroes who journey into darkness, face unspeakable trials, and emerge transformed. But we've forgotten that these aren't just stories. They're instructions, mirrors, templates for the soul's unfolding. And what Jung discovered is this: every single person is living a myth, whether they know it or not. Most of us live inside stories we never chose. Stories passed down by family, culture, media. Stories where we play the loyal worker, the responsible child, the quiet spouse. Roles that win us approval but steal our authenticity. And worst of all, we think those stories are ours. But what if they're not? What if you were born with your own myth, buried beneath expectation and repetition, just waiting to be unearthed? Consider Elena, a surgeon who, for 2 decades, believed her story was about success. She made it. Money, prestige, the admiration of peers. But inside, something gnawed at her. It wasn't boredom. It was a sense that she was in the wrong script. After a panic attack on the operating table, she took time off and, almost by accident, began volunteering at an animal shelter. That's where her real story began. Not as a doctor, but as a healer. Not of bodies, but of broken creatures. Today she still uses her medical skills, but in a different setting, a different rhythm, a different myth. Jung called this the personal myth, an inner narrative that gives our life coherence, meaning, direction. And when we don't live that myth, we feel lost, empty, burned out. Not because life is meaningless, but because we're living someone else's meaning. Have you ever felt like your days are filled with action, but no story? That you're moving, but not journeying? That despite success, there's no significance? Your personal myth doesn't shout. It whispers, in childhood dreams, in irrational longings, in the quiet ache you feel when you see someone doing something you thought was impossible. That ache, that's the ember, that's the flame. But you must choose to follow it. No one can hand you your myth. It must be remembered, reclaimed, rewritten. Because you're not here to copy someone else's path. You're here to blaze one only you can walk. And once you begin walking it, once your life aligns with the truth inside you, everything changes. Energy returns, clarity emerges. Even the chaos begins to make sense. And in that moment, the phoenix inside you doesn't just rise. It recognizes the sky was always waiting. But to take flight, there's one more thing you must remember. Your wings have memory, and they never forgot the sky. Insight 9. The sky remembered your name. There's a moment after the fire, after the breakdown, after the shedding, when everything feels quiet, still. Not because you've found all the answers, but because you've stopped running from the questions. It's in this sacred pause that something extraordinary happens. The world begins to respond, not to who you pretended to be, but to who you truly are. You walk outside and feel the wind differently. You hear a song and cry without warning. You speak and realize, for the first time in years, you're not performing. You're present, alive, real. Jung believed that when a person begins to live authentically, aligned with their inner truth, no longer hiding behind ego or mask, they don't just feel better. They become radiant. Not in the flashy spotlighted way, but in the way a tree is radiant, rooted, grounded, unmistakably itself. It's not that life gets easier, it's that you stop abandoning yourself to make life easier for others. Take Kareem. He left corporate finance not in anger, but in clarity. He didn't blow up his life. He rewrote it. Today, he teaches young men how to express emotion, how to build emotional intelligence, how to unlearn silence. He told a friend once, "I feel like I was always meant to do this, but I had to forget, so I could remember." And that's the truth. The sky never forgot you, even when you forgot yourself, even when you traded your wings for a resume, your voice for approval, your fire for safety. Have you ever had a moment when the smallest thing, a scent, a sound, a sentence, cracks something open inside you? A memory, a dream, a forgotten part. And for a moment, you felt not lost, but found. That is the self-remembering. That is the phoenix recognizing the sky. The beauty of Jung's work isn't that it offers a cure. It offers a return, a homecoming, to a place inside you untouched by shame, unshaken by rejection, unburdened by performance. The world might not understand the new you. That's okay. The sky does, your soul does, and every step you take in that direction is a step into wholeness. But before we close this journey, there's one last truth to reveal. A twist you may not expect. The cage you escaped? It was never locked. Insight. 10. The door was never locked. You spent years searching for the key. Through therapy, success, silence, struggle. You clawed at the bars. You banged on the walls. You whispered prayers into the dark, begging someone, anyone, to show you how to get out. But here's the truth Jung quietly pointed to. The truth that shatters and liberates in the same breath. The door was never locked. The cage you felt, of expectation, fear, identity, was real. But the lock was internal. It was belief. The belief that you had to be someone else to be worthy. The belief that your wildness needed taming. That your softness was weakness. That your dreams were childish. Those weren't facts. They were inherited myths, and you lived inside them as if they were laws. What changed wasn't the world. It was you. You stopped asking for permission to exist. You stopped waiting for external validation. You started listening to the voice you buried beneath performance. And in that moment, the door opened, not with a bang, but with a breath. Jung taught that the self is never destroyed. It waits. It waits in dreams, in symptoms, in synchronicities. It waits in your deepest suffering and in your wildest imagination. It doesn't punish you for forgetting. It only calls louder. And when you finally answer, you don't need anyone to rescue you. You realize you were always holding the key. Think of the moment when a caged bird doesn't escape by force, but by remembering it was born to fly. That's the turning point. That's when survival ends and sovereignty begins. Have you ever looked back at your life and thought, I had the power all along, but I was waiting for someone to give it to me? Have you ever realized the door you feared was locked was just closed? So open it, not with rage, with reverence, with fire, with forgiveness. Forgive the parts of you that kept you safe by hiding. Forgive the mask. Forgive the cage. Forgive even the silence, because it brought you here, to this edge, to this truth, to this ignition. And now, you don't just walk out, you rise. Because the phoenix doesn't wait for rescue. It burns and it remembers. It shatters and it becomes. It doesn't ask for flight. It is flight. And you are not broken. You are becoming. The door is open. The sky is wide. The flame is ready. So fly. Call to action. You were never just a spark. You've just walked through 10 flames. Each one a memory, a truth, a wing you thought you lost. From the cage built in childhood, to the mask you mistook for a face. From the burnout that burned to awaken, to the dreams that dared to speak. You descended into the shadow and found power where you once feared monsters. You saw the therapist not as a mechanic, but a mirror. You realized your breakdown was a birth. Your myth was waiting to be claimed. The sky remembered your name. And the door? It was never locked. This isn't the end of the video. It's the beginning of something deeper, your own return. So, now I ask you, which part burned brightest for you? Was it the silent scream behind your success? The dream you can't forget? The truth that your exhaustion might be sacred, not shameful? Tell me in the comments. Not because the algorithm wants it, but because someone else out there, maybe someone on the brink, is waiting to see they're not alone. Your comment could be their mirror. If you felt something stir during this journey, consider sharing it. Not for the views, but for the fire, for the phoenix still caged in someone else's chest. And if you want more stories that don't just inform, but transform, hit that subscribe button. Not because you have to, but because we're building a space where inner worlds get to breathe again. Remember this, above all, you were never just a spark trying to survive the storm. You are the storm, and the sky was always yours.